So this is where we are today. We're on Chapter 2, Part 7. And we're going to do verses 244 to 248 today. Those are the verses we're going to cover. That's from the Buddhi-Yoga section, which is subsection 4. And we're going to discuss sense-gratification, Karma-Kāṇḍa, the yoga ladder, eternal relationship, karma v karma, and akarma, and equanimity. These are some of the basic terms we're going to cover and how we'll get into it. And this has been our flow. We have, we're here at 6:28, right up at the end of June. And next week at Wednesday, that'll be already into July 5th, day after 4th of July. I wonder if anybody's going to be, that just occurred to me, that's the day after the 4th of July. All right, so we'll cover Bhagavad Gita 2:49 to 53. And we'll talk a little bit about devotional service, entanglement, fruit of activities. Again, karma be karma and akarma, qualifications of the spiritual world, freedom from Vedic ritual, samadhi, and we'll do a recap. SS means subsection, so that'll be the end of subsection 4. We're in subsection 4 today. We were in subsection 4 last week, which was 6:21. We're in it today, and we'll be in subsection 4 next week. And then on July 12th, we'll go into the last subsection of Chapter 2. Again, Chapter 2 is a big, huge chapter. A lot of stuff going on. Because it's a summary chapter. So Krishna summarizes everything before he begins to speak, and that's why Chapter 2 is twice as big as any other chapter, except for Chapter 18, which is also a summary chapter. So both Chapter 18 and Chapter 2 are huge chapters. All right, so that's where we are in the larger scheme of things. And again today, session 31, we're going to do text 44 to 48. We're in subsection 4, which is called Buddhi-Yoga. And we've talked about this term before. Buddhi means intelligence. And so Buddhi-Yoga is just another name for Bhakti-Yoga. What we find is that this section of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uses these terms Karma-Yoga, Buddhi-Yoga, as synonyms for Bhakti-Yoga. And the reason he does that is because Arjuna has made two kinds of objections. Arjuna made the objection that if he was really intelligent, he wouldn't fight. And he's made the objection that he should meditate rather than engaging in this bad karma of fighting. So that's why Krishna is saying, Buddhi, no, intelligence means you should fight. And karma means you should act. So that's why he's using these terms, karma yoga. But in most cases, karma yoga means something different. So we talked about that already a few weeks ago. I'm not going to rehash it. And Buddhi yoga is a term I haven't run across anywhere else except for Bhagavad Gita. It's the only place, as far as I'm aware, that Krishna uses it. And I think he's using it there just to say that, Arjuna, you are speaking learned words, but you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. So this is one of Krishna's themes, that Arjuna, you're presenting yourself as an intelligent person, but you're not actually intelligent. And so if you were intelligent, you would do this, Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of intelligent people. Okay, so, and today again we're going to go over sense gratification, Karma-Kāṇḍa, yoga ladder, our eternal relationship, karma v karma, karma, equanimity. So, session 31. So, this is our overview of Chapter 2. We'll skip through this pretty quickly too. We started with verses 1 through 9, which is a section where Arjuna gives some further doubts that carried over from chapter 1. And then in the second section, which goes from 10 to 30, Krishna begins to reply to Arjuna based on explaining the nature of the body versus the soul in reality. So this is what we did a couple, 3 weeks ago. And then actually 3 weeks ago we did this, Krishna's further arguments explaining the duty of a Kshatriya, which go from 31 to 38. And that's subsection 3. So subsection 1 was his further doubt. Subsection 2 was Krishna replies. That's what I call the not your body section. And subsection 3 is Krishna's arguments about the duty of a Kshatriya. And we are in, as you guessed it, Buddhi-Yoga, subsection 4, which is 39 to 53. We started with 39 last week, and we won't get to 53 this week. We'll be in the middle of that, as I already just said. And finally, in not next week, but the following week, we'll begin the last subsection where Krishna speaks on transcendentalists. And Arjuna opens that with asking 4 questions, which Krishna will answer, and that'll take us from verse 54 to 72. So that's where we are in the grand scheme of things. Here are verses. We're going to roar right into it here. This is in subsection 3, or rather subsection 4, which is this Buddhi-Yoga subsection. And we start right off here with, in the mind of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. So, Buddhi-Yogam, so this is Krishna explaining to Arjuna about the nature of a person who's intelligent. So, the first thing that he points up here is that sense enjoyment and devotional service are at opposite ends from one another. But right away I have to put a caveat in here because none of us can go cold turkey off sense enjoyment in the material world right away. We have to gradually give up material sense gratification. And that is technically called Karma-Mishra Bhakti. So pure bhakti is complete devotion to the Supreme Lord with no thought for oneself. But Karma-Mishra Bhakti is we're following the principles of devotional service, but we are still junkies to the material world. We still want some material things. We know that it's not good for us or healthy in the long run, and we're trying to give them up, but it's not so easy because we have been in the material world so many lifetimes. So this is a gradual process. But if someone who tries to practice bhakti still has the goal of their lives as sense gratification, it ain't going to happen. It won't work, you know. So there's 2 different things here. One of them is engaging in bhakti yoga and trying to work free from material desires, knowing service to Krishna is the real goal of life. The other one is maybe fooling around with bhakti, but your real goal is still you want to enjoy the material world, which means you won't go very deep in bhakti that way. So that's what's indicated here. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. What do I want to say about this? So, one of the questions we can ask right away here on verse 44 is, wait a minute. Why bhakti? What's so special about bhakti? Krishna's talking about karma. Later on, he'll talk about Astanga Yoga. He'll talk about Jnana Yoga. He'll talk about all these things. Why all this stuff about bhakti? it looks like Krishna is giving Arjuna all these options. He should take whichever one he resonates with. And most people who read the Bhagavad Gita and most people who explain the Bhagavad Gita have this outlook. If you read most Gitas or you go to people who are explaining the Gita, they will kind of say, well, you know, Krishna is giving Arjuna all these options. You could, if you resonate, you can do karma yoga. If rather you like devotion, you can do bhakti yoga. If you're more into the esoteric stuff, you can do Ashtanga yoga and learn the postures and the breathing exercises. But Krishna's not really saying that. That's the thing that most people lack. And in his purports, Prabhupada mentions verse 15:15. So in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, you know, Krishna is saying that, you know, I am the knower of the Vedas, I'm the compiler of the Vedas, and I am the goal of the Vedas. Vedanta Krit Veda Vedeva Chaham. So, Vedas Jasarvara Hameva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Veda Vedeva Chaham. So he starts off by saying that I am in everyone's heart, and from me come knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. That's 15:15. And there, if someone's actually talking about the Vedas and they know their stuff, then you can't ignore Krishna's own statement. Krishna's saying that the purpose of the Vedas is to know him. That is, to develop a relationship with the Supreme Lord through the process we know as Bhakti Yoga. That's why we say Bhakti Yoga is not just one of the possibilities. Bhakti Yoga is the possibility. It is the one thing that will actually make a difference. You can follow Jnana Yoga, you can follow Karma Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, you can follow these things, but they don't really get you there. And in a minute we're going to talk about the yoga ladder, and that'll make it a little bit more clear. Any question about that part? Okay. So, next thing here. 45. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Arjuna become transcendental to these three modes, be free from all dualities and from all anxiety for gain and safety, and be established in the self. This verse is the first time so far that Krishna has mentioned the three modes of nature. This is what Buddhi-Yoga says in his book. And this concept of the three modes of nature, you will not find any other religion on the planet. You won't find it really, maybe a little bit in Buddhism, you know. You won't find it in any Western philosophy at all. It's unique to the Vedas. We have Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. Goodness, and we have passion, and we have ignorance. And these are integral to the reality of the world that we live in. And they are like weather. You know, if you go out and the weather's nice, you have one experience. If you go out and the weather's really cold and miserable, you have a different experience. And if you go out and the weather is rainy, you have yet a different experience. So these three modes are not visible so much, but they are both within and without. There's a whole chapter, chapter 14, which deals with the three modes of nature. So I'm not going to get deep into the weeds on the three modes of nature. But what Krishna is saying there is the Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of nature. Arjuna, be transcendental to these three modes, be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So what's interesting is that most of the Vedas, we said this last week too, most of the Vedas is about how to enjoy good karma in the material world. which is not the purpose of the Vedas at all. Krishna just said what the purpose of the Vedas was. Vedanta Krit Veda Vedeva Chaham. That I'm the knower, the compiler, and the goal of the Vedas. So Krishna is the goal, not to enjoy nicely in the material world. But most of the Vedas actually is all kinds of tips and tricks and formulas and ritual so that you can enjoy nicely in the material world. And if you're a little bit interested in God, that's there too, but that's not really the focus. So that's why Krishna is telling Arjuna, you may have read the Vedas, and Arjuna certainly has been a person who was schooled in Vedic knowledge, but mostly the Vedas are not really what you want to focus in on. You want to focus in on devotion, and there are sections of the Vedas that do focus in on devotion. We will do a spotlight on that a little bit later in this lecture today. So now, see if there's any other point I wanted to mention there. So we're starting to sniff out that there may be some kind of hierarchy, some kind of level of what beats what. And Krishna's not explaining that, and he doesn't, in any overall way in Bhagavad Gita. But it is there. And the acharyas and many of our devotee scholars, they explain that this is the yoga ladder. Not only the yoga ladder, but there are Vedic literatures. And some literatures are dealing with more mundane topics, and other literatures are dealing with more transcendental topics. So in any case, here he's saying, be free from dualities and all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. This gets back to the idea of toleration. We heard a little bit about toleration earlier, in the second chapter, in the not the body section. And that was matra sparshas kunteo shitosna sukadukada agama payano just matra sparshas kunteo shitosna sukadukada agama payano just tamsatiksha shvabarata. That's what the verse is. And that's saying that happiness and distress are like winter and summer. One must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So in our everyday life, we know that some days we are, bathing in the sunshine. Other days are like, crawling through the mud with bullets flying over our head. Some days are one way and some days are the other. And the process of becoming a transcendentalist means eventually you don't pay that much attention to these things. You learn how to tolerate. Okay, now we're going to move to 46. All the purposes served by the small well can at once be served by the great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. So again, we're starting to sniff that there is some kind of hierarchy or echelon here. There's something that you can do that covers all your bases for all these other, the Vedas are vast. You could never read all the Vedas in your whole life if you set out to do it. Basically, you could never do it unless that's all you ever did in your life was read Vedas. But, the question then is, what's most important? Where should you start? And that's what a spiritual master focuses you on. And Krishna himself is pointing out here that one should actually focus, if they're intelligent, not on this how to enjoy in the material world aspect of the Vedas, which is unfortunately about 95% of the Vedas. So the huge lion's share of Vedic text is all about how to enjoy the material world, which is not really the purpose of the Vedas, but it's there. Why is it there? because a lot of people are not ready for bhakti. They're not interested in serving God, but they are interested in enjoying the world. So if they do it in a Vedic way, at least it won't create a, crossfire hurricane of horror stories in the material world, like we see today. That if people at least try to enjoy following Vedic formulas for material enjoyment, the whole of society won't be really, such a mess. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So if you have a question, you can stop me at any point. Okay, now we have 2 verses left for today. This is 47 and 48. 47, you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Now, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna in what attitude, what kind of mentality he should have in his fighting. And Arjuna, you'll see, he doesn't exactly comprehend. So if you're having trouble comprehending, just know that before you, Arjuna also had trouble comprehending. So don't feel bad. And again, as I say, I'm talking about a lot of stuff when I'm covering the Bhagavad Gita here. So if there's some aspects of it that you can't figure out, don't worry about it, just move on. And later maybe it can come to you. And these sessions on Gita from Zero are pretty dense, so some people may need to go through them 2 or 3 times to actually get what's going on here. I'm packing a lot of things into here because I want to be very comprehensive about at least understanding the overall structure and how the philosophy of the Vedas relates to modern religious philosophy, how it relates to modern secular philosophy, and all those other things. Okay, so Krishna is telling Arjuna how to execute his duty. Now, 48, perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. So Arjuna is hearing of this concept of equanimity. And in a minute, we're going to talk a little bit more about what equanimity means. But it basically means to abandon attachment to success or failure. Arjuna has a duty to do. He doesn't get the result of the duty, nor if he does it to the best of his ability and he fails, there's still no loss there. Because success or failure is not up to Arjuna, it's up to Krishna. And similarly, in our own prosecution of devotional service, sometimes we will be successful and sometimes not. And we should never be depressed. We might reassess how our strategy and change the strategy to some extent. But there's no loss in attempting to serve Krishna by giving Krishna consciousness to others. All right. Any questions? Yeah.
You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. But if you act, aren't you going to suffer or enjoy the results? It's just ordinary karma?
Technically, no. Karma is the big unknown of Western philosophy. That Western philosophy understands so many intricacies of how the universe works and the possibilities, but Western philosophy seems to completely neglect the concept of karma. However, in the end, karma isn't even the bottom line. The bottom line is Krishna. And Krishna can play with karma if he wants to. And in chapter 3, we're going to learn a little bit more about this concept of karma. And you will necessarily when you perform any action, there will be fruits. There's no doubt about that. That's the fruit. The question is, what is your mentality or relationship to the fruits? If you go to work, you're going to get money back. That's the ostensible reason why people give their time to do something. Usually they just not do. Then there's some, check that comes out at the end of it. That's the fruit. Now, if one thinks, oh, these fruits are all mine to enjoy the way I want, then one will become entangled. But instead one thinks, I have to work in this world, and there are necessities I have for making ends meet, meeting the requirements of food and roof over the head, clothes, etc., etc. I'll meet those. But then I want to use whatever I have left over to push forward Krishna consciousness in some way. Then one is not claiming the fruits of the activity. And that will not be, entangling. But most people have no idea of this, and they assume the entire 100% fruit of all their action is their own to do with as they like. And this is why people become entangled. Now, Arjuna is about to fight a war. Indeed, he will fight the war, and he and his brothers will be victorious, and indeed they will get the kingdom. In other words, that time they were going to become the rulers of the entire earth, So that's what will happen as a result of it. Now, Arjuna knew better than to think, now, hot dang, I can do anything I want, I'm the king of the world. No, he understood that he had to administer it in a Vedic appropriate way to help people become spiritually conscious. So this is the subtlety there, that there will be sometimes bad results, even from doing good things, which is sometimes people find that mysterious, I'm trying to do something good and I get a bad result, As they say, no good deed ever goes unpunished. So sometimes we do a good thing and a negative result occurs, because that's the nature of the way the material world works. And this gets into some other subtleties which I don't want to tread into right now, because they will take us on a tangent from my main, things I want to come up with, but get across rather. But the idea is there, that karma in the ordinary sense means you have an idea in your mind what you want, you perform the right activity to get it, and then when you get it, you enjoy it. That's regular karma. But if you understand that the results I get are not really mine, I should use them in the sense of what can I best use them, at the same time be progressive in spiritual life, then that's no longer karma. That's devotion. The only difference is the attitude. The attitude is what makes the difference. Does that help you understand? Okay. Somebody else had a question?
No, it was similar question. So that's,
Similar
yeah,
question.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So now, here are, some high points from the purports to this section 44 to 48. These are the high points. Prabhupada in his purport explains the word samadhi, which Prabhupada says means fixed mind. So samadhi means fixed mind. And this is a word that comes out of the vocabulary of the yoga systems, the Ashtanga yoga. So there is the final point of yoga, which is samadhi, which means fixed mind. Fixed on what? Fixed on the Supreme Lord in service. So that's what the word samadhi means. And we've discussed a little bit how if one is serious about enjoying the world, one will never become very serious about performing devotion. So if you think that big apple of material happiness is out there, go for it. Be my guest. Let me know how it works out. It's that perennial, gold pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the eternal, silver mountain that we are eternally trying to find. We're walking toward it. Never quite works out, but we never wise up, and therefore we go from lifetime after lifetime to lifetime. But at some point, that idea that somewhere, sometime, somehow, I will get my break and I will enjoy like anything. Someday, in some lifetime, we'll all come to realization, ain't never happening. It's the promise that never comes true. And at that point, we're ready for devotion. That's what's sometimes called being materially exhausted. When a person finally realizes the material world is just stacked against you, no matter who you are. You can be on the bottom rung of karma, or you can be way up there and a king of some kind or another, a very wealthy person, very famous person. Still doesn't matter. You're still going to get the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune because karma doesn't stop. And then you're a candidate for devotion. Vedas mostly deal with fruit of work. So we talked about that, how 95% of the Vedas are all about fruit of work. They're not about devotion. But if one starts by reading that part of the Vedas, which is about devotion, you will save a lot of time. And you won't lose or miss out on anything. As Krishna just said, whatever one can get from the small reservoirs of water, one can automatically get from the large reservoir of water, like a small well one can get. So similarly, all the goals of the Vedas can be satisfied to one who knows what the ultimate purpose of the Vedas is. And we just said the ultimate purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. So, okay, we just talked about true purpose of the Vedas, 15:15. We'll hear this word quite a lot, Karma-Kāṇḍa. What is Karma-Kāṇḍa? It is a kind of slice of Vedic writing. There's Karma-Kāṇḍa, Upasana-Kāṇḍa, and Jnana-Kāṇḍa. So these are sort of, in some kind of broad stroke, these sections of the Vedas, which Karma-Kāṇḍa is help a person to understand how to enjoy the material world, but in a pious Vedic way, not in a kill, gouge, burn, and plunder way, in a Vedic way. Now, Upasana-Kāṇḍa is how to enjoy, but to do it through worshiping various demigods. And Jnana-Kāṇḍa is how to understand what is actually going on in this material world. So those are three sections of the Vedas. Karma-Kāṇḍa, I tried to find out some more about what is exactly the books that are involved in Karma-Kāṇḍa. The only thing I came up with was somewhere it mentions something called the Kalpa Sutra, which I don't know. I've never even heard of it before. But basically, I think Karma-Kāṇḍa is all those sections of the Vedas that help us to understand how to enjoy, but in a pious Vedic way. And what you're going to find is if you try, you won't be able to read all the Vedas. There's too much there. And you'll certainly not be able to follow all the rituals of the Vedas because there's too many of them. So then the question is, well, what do we do? And this is why Krishna made that verse about all the purposes of the small wells can be achieved by the large reservoir of water. All the purposes of the small wells can be achieved by the large bodies of water. So one knows the purpose. If one engages in devotional service, you've cut to the chase. You've made and done all the things that might be incumbent upon you from any of your other obligations to the outside world. So if you please Krishna, you've pleased everybody. You don't have to necessarily follow all those details, and there's so many of them. One time, Allen Ginsberg was speaking with Prabhupada, and he said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, you have given so many rules and regulations. And Prabhupada said to Allen Ginsberg, if you knew the ones I'd left out, you would faint. So, at any rate, all right, so we've seen that it's not possible, but one can, by understanding the purpose of the Vedas, resolve all of one's obligations in one fell swoop through, and we're going to learn the chanting of Hare Krishna. That's the cut to the chase. If we learn how to seriously engage in devotional service, which the centermost aspect of is chanting the holy names of the Lord. If we're doing that, we are resolving and absolving ourselves from all other requirements of Vedic knowledge. And as the Bhagavad Gita wears on, as we go through it, we'll discover that that point is made over and over again. So, we have this, Prabhupada mentions the Prakashananda Saraswati dialogue with Lord Chaitanya. So Prakashananda was a great Mayavadi sannyasi. He had lots of followers. And they were deriding Lord Chaitanya because Lord Chaitanya was chanting Hare Krishna, right? So Prakashananda invited Lord Chaitanya to a dinner. So they were all assembled, and Lord Chaitanya came in at the end of the dinner, before the dinner started. But he came in and he sat in the back, right by where people wash their feet. And Prakashananda said, "My dear sannyasi, why are you sitting back there? It's dirty. You should come forward." And so, in this way, Prakashananda actually did devotional service. He invited Lord Chaitanya forward, and then he said, we hear, my dear Chaitanya, that you are singing and dancing like sentimental musicians, but sannyasis, you're a sannyasi, and you are been initiated in the Bharatis, so you should know that sannyasis study Vedanta. And so why are you not studying Vedanta? And instead, you are singing and dancing like a sentimental musician. And Lord Chaitanya replied by saying, "My dear Prakashananda, my spiritual master called me a fool, and he said I'm not qualified to study Vedanta, but he taught me this mantra. And so when I sing it, I go crazy, and I don't know why, but I can't stop singing it." So that's how Lord Chaitanya kind of explained it to him. But he won over Prakashananda and all of his followers in the long run in that whole interchange. So we're going to talk a little bit about types of duty and work, and we're going to touch on equanimity. I wanted to mention some of Burijan's points here. So if someone's attached to only Karma-Kāṇḍa, then one won't really get very far. One will become bewildered because he doesn't know the real purpose of the Vedas. What do I want to focus in on here? So we've talked about some of this. Okay, so I wanted to explain this. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, as Burijan points out, is we've been focusing on this verse, all the small wells can be satisfied. All their purposes can be satisfied by one who has the access to a large body of water. So in India, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur talks about the fact that you have a well that's for drinking water, and then you have a well for people to bathe, and you have a well for people to wash dishes. You don't want to be drinking from the same well that people wash dishes in or take bath from, for obvious reasons, for sanitary purposes. However, if you come to the bank of a river, since a river is so big and there's so much water, you can do any of those things. You can bathe in a river, you can wash your dishes, or you can drink from the river. So this is kind of explaining that analogy that Krishna is using as, let me go back to it here real quick. Oh, I went the wrong way. Right, 46. All the purposes of the small well can at once be served by the great reservoirs of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. So that's 46. That was a key verse in today's section. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this Nishkama Karma Yoga in a minute. You know, that Karma Yoga means to act, Nish means not, and Kama means desire, how to act without material desire. Any questions before we kind of move on? I'm going to kind of wrap up a few main points here. And this is, remember we talked about the fish out of water? No, this is my use of that one. So what do we mean by sense gratification? Senses meaning desirable external stimulus. For most people, this is what life's about. We figure out what things we like to taste, touch, smell, hear, feel, etc., and we go about trying to find them. Simultaneously, we figure out what we really don't like to touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, and see, and we go about avoiding those things. So sense gratification is about finding desirable sensual stimulus and avoiding unpleasant experiences. And for most people, that is life in a nutshell. That's what we do 24/7. From the time we get up to the time we go to sleep, we are finding things that are desirable for our senses and avoiding things that are unpleasant. So a life based on maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain is a mundane life, and there's no deep realization that comes from that. And it is the default mode for everyone in our Kali Yuga. So in our modern world, no one even questions the idea of pursuit of material happiness as a goal. It's just assumed that's what it is. And even if people don't consciously think about that, their entire life and the structure of their priorities and their day-to-day activities is all about this one thing: how to pursue material happiness. And people are not even aware that this is a orientation, and that there are alternatives to this orientation, namely devotional service. So here we see this fish which is out of water, and you can give the fish a hot dog, or you can give the fish some dollar bills, or some street drugs, or some pornography or whatever. But the fish really needs water. That's what the fish needs. And the fish will never be satisfied out of water. So we are like the fish out of water, that we really need connection with the Supreme Lord. We don't know that's what we need, but that's what we actually need. And if we start making our way there, everything starts to work out, and we start to feel very good about things, even though we don't actually understand how it's working. However, if we turn our back and we're more and more convinced that we just want to enjoy based on our own menu of things that we like, and we have our own techniques and our strategies for how we're going to do that, we will never be really happy. We will never be satisfied. And in spite of everything, we will still suffer, because we're a fish out of water. We don't belong in this material world. And we can never be fully and really happy in this material world. But if we don't know any better, we're going to stay here. lifetime after lifetime. We're just going to make the same mistakes over and over again. So we need to go back to the spiritual world. There we can actually be happy. Here we can't. Well, we can be happy. Even a person who is fully engaged in devotional service can be happy even in this material world, even in hell for that matter. But the fact is that when we're connected with the Supreme Lord, that is the very definition of deep satisfaction. All right, so that's a quick explanation of sense gratification. Yes?
I just wanted to comment. Number 5, it reminds me, I haven't kept TV for 4 years, but before that, as years go on and on, at Christmas time, getting your Amazon order and the new car, that's going to give you, like the commercials, that's what it shows.
Right.
And even on the radio, it's all secular music, just practically now for Christmas.
Right.
So all the,
You can enjoy in this way, you can enjoy in that way. Oh, I bet you didn't think you could enjoy in this new way. And people are spending a lot of time in Silicon Valley and places, dreaming up new ways that people can enjoy that nobody ever thought of before, and you can try to do them. This morning, a devotee was giving a class about Comic-Con, so people do what they call cosplay. They dress up as Batman or Superman or something like that. And they go to a big convention, and that's their whole concept of enjoyment. A few years ago, there was no concept like that, that you would go do something like that. So you can find new ways to enjoy, spend hours looking at short TikTok videos, all those kind of things. So, okay, so now this is a quick look at the yoga ladder. And this is a thing that is not mentioned specifically in Bhagavad Gita, but this is what we are gradually learning about, that these are stages of consciousness, and as you rise in these stages of consciousness, you are closer to the center of the bullseye, whereas the lower stages, you're drifting quite a ways off. You're kind of lost in the material world. So at the bottom is that stage which is lovingly referred to in the Vedas as animal life. Dvipada Pashu, which actually means, Dvipad means two-legged, Pashu is animal. So people who have no interest in any kind of religion or spiritual life whatsoever, they just, kick, gouge, burn, and plunder to get what they want. And that's animal life. Or maybe some do it in a little more genteel way. They're just working hard to get what they want, and they try to enjoy that way. That's the bottom of the rung. Above that is Karma-Kāṇḍa. We talked about that. That's where one realizes that there are some rules if you want to be happy in the material world. And if you follow those rules, you can be happy and you won't create so much disturbance to other people. And you will, to some extent, be happy in the material world. Nobody's happy in the material world fully. Then above that is Karma Yoga, which is where now a person has realized that there is something called the Supreme, and one is trying to learn something about the Supreme. But still, one may be still focused on material gratification. Most religious life in the modern world is in this stage, Karma Yoga. We know there's a God, and we do some things for God. We follow some rituals. That's good. And we expect that we follow some rituals, so we'll be okay. And then, basically our life is still about how we're going to enjoy, but we understand we have to do some rituals, so that's Karma Yoga. Now above that is Jnana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga is the first inkling that the human being comes to, where they realize that this sense gratification I've tried to enjoy for so many lifetimes and so many years. It's never worked out for me. I'll bet you it doesn't work at all. And so then when one comes to that conclusion for the first time, they think, well, if sense gratification doesn't work, what does? What's really going on here? And then a person starts to travel through various mystical literatures and yoga groups and meditations of various types and odd and arcane philosophies and so on and so forth. One tries to figure out, well, what if sense gratification isn't what life's about, then what is, you know? Now, finally above that is something called Ashtanga Yoga, which is where a person finally comes to realization. I don't have to read all these wild books about various kinds of meditation practices and obscure philosophy. I can just do some bodily postures. And if I do them correctly, I'll get an internal deep realization. And so a person betakes themselves to the process of Ashtanga Yoga. Now, Ashtanga Yoga is targeting 3, Paramatma realization. Jnana Yoga targets 4, Brahman realization. So those who are advanced jnanis will try to merge with the white light, whereas those who are Ashtanga yogis will try to, as this yogi is doing here, recognize and come to the Sat chakras, the 6 chakras, and go to the heart chakra. And in the heart chakra is the Supreme Lord as Paramatma. And so that's what the Ashtanga yogi is focusing on. Now, finally, above all that, we have Bhakti Yoga. And Bhakti Yoga is the process of devotion to the Supreme. So now we know that there's a Supreme, and we know that the real goal of life is to serve the Supreme. And so if one has started Bhakti Yoga, they don't have to worry about any of this other stuff. They don't have to worry about whether they followed Karma-Kāṇḍa regulations. They don't have to become very seriously involved with Ashtanga Yoga unless they just want to do it for health, you know. And all these other things are precluded and superseded by Bhakti Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga is different from most religions inasmuch as we are not serving God so God will give us material benedictions. We are serving God, period. So that is the yoga ladder. Now, again, this is not explicitly explained anywhere in Bhagavad Gita, but Buddhi-Yoga mentions it in his book, Surrender Unto Me. And it is one of the things that gets talked about a lot because, Krishna is mentioning this to Arjuna. The Vedas mainly deal with the modes of nature, rise above this. So he's saying, Arjuna, don't be a Karma-Kāṇḍa, Actually, you should engage in bhakti. Eventually he'll tell Arjuna that straight out at the end of 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He'll explain, that the bhakti yoga is actually what he wants Arjuna to be. Now, along with this, we have these various literatures that are associated with it, So the Samhitas, those are the 4 Vedas. That's what we usually call them, the Rig, Sama, Atharva, and Yajurveda. So those are Samhitas. Now, Samhita is identical with the 4 Vedas themselves. And they're basically almost completely about fruitive activity, various odes and, glorifications of various demigods, and why these demigods are great, and what boons we can get from which demigod, how to go about it, what that's all about. And that leads to the Brahmanas, which are sometimes called. They're expanded from the 4 Vedas, and therefore city-dwelling householders, how they can perform various rituals, again, for material benefit. Then the next declination of the Vedic literatures as a category, we have the Aranyakas, which are for forest dwellers. Now, this assumes that a person is kind of done with family life and has gone to the forest for some kind of more serious spiritual life. So this is kind of in the category of karma yoga. So we've got Aranyakas. And for those deeper into spiritual life, we have the Upanishads, which are kind of for the jnanis, for people who are studying all these, various mystic paths and what's the real deal behind this mysterious world. If it isn't sense gratification, then what is it? And so we have the Upanishads. And of course, for those who are Ashtanga yogis, we have the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. They explain the process of yoga, how to do it. But for the devotees, we have the Puranas, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam. Not even all the Puranas are that much dedicated to explaining bhakti, but the Srimad Bhagavatam is there. And out of all the Puranas, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the one that does not beat around the bush. It does not enthuse us or inspire us or extol the virtues of karma or jnana or any of these other lower paths. It focuses directly on devotion and only on devotion. So this is how these various literatures go along with the yoga ladder. So we have, these are various paths, and these are the books associated with those various paths. And for the Bhakti Yoga path, it's the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam primarily. These are the two literatures that do not waste your time with learning various songs for Lord Shiva or various kinds of Vedic, prescriptions for how to ward off bad planets or evil spirits, etc., how to make your business proper, how to get a attractive and submissive wife, and all those kinds of things, which is what a lot of stuff is going on in the Vedas. Okay, so I want to wrap up here. Too much stuff again. Types of duty and work. So in the purport, Prabhupada mentions prescribed duties, capricious work, and inaction. So prescribed duties means that each of the four orders of the Vedas, the Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Sudra, have duties. And so if a person performs those, one is performing prescribed duties. Capricious work means that they're doing something that's sinful. It's not part of their varnashram, prescription, and is injurious or harmful to others. And of course, inaction. In this case, Krishna is telling Arjuna that his failure to action will cause him harm, not his acting by being a warrior. Now notice that here we have inaction, and down on the very bottom we also have inaction, but there it means something a little different. So later on we're going to see that inaction means acting but without desire for the result. That's a different kind of inaction. So just be aware, I didn't create it, that's just the way it is, and so later on when we talk about inaction, we're going to mean that kind of inaction. But right now, we're meaning inaction to fail to perform our duty. So again, Prabhupada mentions routine work, which is work according to Varnashram Dharma. Again, the same thing as prescribed duties. So these are the kind of things a person works. Emergency work. So this is also mentioned in the Vedas. Sometimes during emergencies, people have to do special things which they wouldn't do at a normal time. And they might break rules that they wouldn't at an ordinary time. So that's emergency work. And desired activities, Prabhupada uses this word in his purport, in this case means fruitive work. Work with specific intent to get some kind of material benediction from it. Any questions? Yeah.
Can we go back to the yoga ladder?
Okay.
Can you describe any difference between Karma Yoga and Karma-Kāṇḍa?
Right. The difference is that Karma-Kāṇḍa has no focus on the Supreme at all. It's just knowing that there is a system, the Vedas, and if you follow it properly, you can get material happiness. Whereas Karma-Kāṇḍa, there is some notion of a higher being or a higher purpose. And one is not just trying to fulfill their material desires, but one also thinks that there's something more to it. It's a more sophisticated version. And most of modern religion falls in this category because a lot of people, all non-atheists, are aware that there's a God. But in general, the idea is that God is the order supplier. I will please God through some various ritual, and then God will please me because I've done something for him, so now he will reciprocate back. And that's, a realization of God, but not a very deep one, because the commitment is still to sense gratification. Whereas in Karma-Kāṇḍa, none of that is there. One is just trying to follow, basic rules and regulations for how to live in a way where one doesn't create harm so much to others and one can, be happy in material life.
So the idea of devoting your work.
Sorry about that one.
Does that fit somewhere else entirely?
Yeah. Devotees up here at Bhakti-Yoga. Bhakti-Yoga is where we understand there's a God, and we understand that we're working on a path to just try to serve God without any material motivations. We may not be there yet. We may still have the mixed material motivations, but we know that we shouldn't. Whereas in Karma Yoga, we don't know that. We're serving God, and we think that everybody's serving God because God will serve them, and that's all. That's what it's all about, That's the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga in the yoga ladder system. Any other questions?
So when we get too personal, how do you relate to forest dwellers?
You mean, why did I use that as my...
I mean,
Yeah, because the word Aranyaka actually means forest dwellers. So we talked about that. I guess this is the next. Yeah, so you see here, Aranyakas for forest dwellers. So this was the books of the Vedas that were written with the express purpose of those who were detached from their home and their family, living in the forest for spiritual purification, what they should read to purify themselves and what activities. So these are the Aranyakas, and that's where forest dwellers comes from. Yeah.
last slide you had
Last. This one?
Yeah. Can you describe these illustrations? What they mean?
Oh yeah, that's these are the four varnas. In modern India, there's called the caste system, but the caste system is a travesty or a miscomprehended and misapplied version of the four varnas. And the four varnas are Brahmana, which you see in the top left, the Kshatriya, which you see in the top right, the Vaishya, which you see in the bottom left, and the Shudra, which you see in the bottom right. So everyone will naturally, even if nobody makes these, even if nobody uses the names or knows anything about this, some people will be intellectual, some people will be naturally inclined toward teaching and helping others and involved in spiritual quests and explanations. Other people will be interested in martial arts, in organization, fighting, warfare, the act of military, regimen. Some people will be like that, and police activity. Then you have the Vaishyas. Some people will be interested in business and agriculture and providing for society in various ways. And then all the other people who do whatever else it is to fill in the missing pieces, those are in the category of Shudras. So these are not by birth, as is commonly miscomprehended in India, but actually these are based on one's quality and work, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, not on birth. Okay. So last slide here is equanimity. This was 248. Perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachments to success and failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. Yoga sta kuru karmani sangam chatva dhananjaya siddhi asiddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. So equanimity means abandoning attachment to success or failure. We have a duty, we try to do it to our best ability. We may be successful, we may not be successful. But in any case, because we're performing our duty, we are successful whether externally the success is visible or not. And this is the two birds in the tree art piece here, where you have Krishna is the witnessing bird, and the rest of us are the eating bird. The bird is eating the fruits of the tree, trying to enjoy the fruits of activity. And Krishna is the witnessing bird, and he's waiting for the eating bird to turn to him. So this is, if we can abandon the attempt to try to enjoy all the fruits of our labors completely on our own, then we can make progress, and we will be situated in what is called equanimity. Okay, so now again we'll just wrap up with this is where we were today. We talked about sense gratification, Karma-Kāṇḍa, the yoga ladder, our eternal relationship with Karma-Kāṇḍa duties, and the fruits of work. We talked about karma, vikarma, and akarma a little bit, and we talked about equanimity. All right, so next week we'll be on to devotional service, entanglement, etc. These will be the last part of subsection 4 from 49 to 53, and we'll do a recap of subsection 4. That's next week. Final questions or comments? All right, so thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Hare Krishna.